Alrighty, Captains, before I begin, I just want to mention that the compiled wire patch that is fully editable is available to download from the link in the video description below. Alrighty, so you may have seen this particular effect or a variation of this in a lot of motion graphics recently. What I wanted to do was try and create this inside of Wire. Let's have a quick look at what we've got here. This particular animated version, I have quite a few effects that are exposed, some parameters that are exposed inside of Arena, and I've just got some envelopes playing around with those. Just to show what we can do, but let's drag the raw effect in. So this will be the look of the effect if you drag it straight in. If you're not used to using wire effects inside of Resolume Arena, you just drag the wired effect into your deck and let go, and it will give you the option to install it. And for this one in particular, it's a source, so it'll be available under the sources tab. So let's have a quick look at what we've got here. So we have, first of all, a string in, so we can do something like hello world for our string. We have an offset value here, which is how far the background text is offset from the main letter there. We have a shrink instances parameter, which means we can actually shrink the instances as they get further away. So you can animate that if you want. Again, it's just static by nature. The font size here allows us to shrink this and get it larger. What we'll find if we have a lot of words, so say ctrldchaos, it'll actually split into two lines. And we don't want that because the effect's kind of broken at that point. It works best with one line. So we can just drop our text down and there we go. So here's our font size. We're basically changing it like that. And for this sort of thing, it rolls into the edge thickness. It's probably a little bit too thick for that sort of tiny text. So we can bring it into here. I'm just going to remove this and reset our size so we can get a bit further in and reset our font size to 1.5. So the edge thickness is normally by default 1, but you can make that as large or small as you want. There's a little toggle here called full letters. And what that does is it turns on and off that cropping. So here you can see the letters are cropped as they go across. They automatically crop in as they get in. With the full letters, they basically don't crop at all. I can find this is a little distracting sometimes. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes it's better to have the cropped version. And this nudge top, what I'll do is make this a very, very large font size. You'll find here, if you go really, really large, there is a slight difference in the height at the top here. And what this will allow you to do is just nudge it down to bring it back in. Something you shouldn't really ever need to do unless you're using really, really large font sizes. And again, down the bottom here, you see when you shrink it down, you just want to just reset that out to about 0.3. So if I just reset all this and just go back to world, here we are. Now that's the basic thing. Again, you can animate any of these parameters. I've just got a bit of a curve here going for the shrink instance as well as the in and out and the speed. Let's take a look at this inside of Wire. So here we are inside of Resolume Wire. And this is the patch. So if you actually jump into Arena, you can click on the open here. Oops, sorry, fork the project. And you can basically create a new name and open it up inside of Wire. I'll drop that down. So what do we have inside of Wire? All right, if we look at our resources and our dashboard, we have all of the exposed inputs. And the way I like to build things, all my inputs are on the left-hand side and in yellow. This resolution is in yellow just because it's linked directly over here. Let's have a quick look before we start breaking this down. So we have in here our string in, which is our text, our nudge top, like I said before, to adjust the gap in the top section, our shrink instances, which will allow us to shrink those in and out, our patch info. Now this is important in case we're not using a 16:9 slice. So say we're doing a double wide or something that's thinner. We can actually go and grab the resolution, and that's going to drive a lot of the effects that are actually in here. A lot of this math is driven by the height or the width of the resolution. The font size here, again, is clicked into a bunch of things. You can see wherever it goes yellow, it's linked in, whatever these colored lines. The offset values here are going to control a couple of linear. Let's go back into our system and reset this back to 1.5. The offset nodes here are going to control our linear instancing. We have the full letters toggle. Again, like we said before, makes letters cropped or not cropped, and our edge thickness. So I'm just going to reset these because it's a little bit easier to go them at the default value. So 0.5, 1.5, and 1. So let's have a look at how really high end how this works. So there is an output node at the back here with a video mixer. This has 3 separate layers to it. So the first one is a layer 3. That's our solid text that always sits on top of everything else. Directly below it, we have our top text, our top instance text, and the bottom layer is our bottom instance text. So what I'll do is I'll just move some of these around so it's a little bit easier to follow our workflow. I'm just going to grab everything in the top here and just move that up and out of the way. Then I'm going to grab everything at the bottom here and just move it just a little bit further down so we can see things and how they connect a little bit better. Grab everything at once and just separate this out. If it'll play along nicely, there we go. Cool. All right. So let's first start from the left with our inputs. So what I found out after messing around with this and trying to do a bunch of different math systems was it was much easier for me to come across and say, all right, when the offset is at 1 and the font size is at 1, then everything is spaced nicely apart. Now there's a bunch of things like dividing things by 4 and dividing them by 8 to get to this section. But when the value of 1 and 1 is here, that means that it's really clean to do everything on a value of 1. So we can do 1 take X, or we can do multiplication or division on that 1. And it's just really simple. So one of the things we've done here is we've linked our scale and our offset by basically coming in and saying this multiply, it's grabbing our font size and our offset and multiplying them together. Now, right now, that is 1, which is great. We can, if we want to do a divide on that here, and then say that's going to be a value of 4. And we're basically going to say, give that a 0.25. Now we're going to use this later on down here as another value inside of our instancing, just to be able to get the amount of distance between these letters really well. So let's jump in a bit of order of process. So let's look at our masking first. So we come into our offset, set this back to 0.5. And let's say our font size to 1.5, just so it's a bit easier to see down here. So how is the masking actually done? Right, I'm going to unpin the main output, and I'm going to pin down here to this rectangle. So what we're actually doing is we are going to be grabbing a bunch of inputs. So this first map node here, now remaps, this one's grabbing the offset value, so our dashboard offset. It's going into a map node, which is allowing us to go from 0 to 1 in our offset, and it's going to convert that into a range from 2 to 0. Then directly below that, we have a divide node. Now he's going to take our font size here, which is 1.5, and I'm dividing it by 10. Realistically, I should probably set this to be 1/10 of the height of the composition. But for me right now, this is 1080. So it was just 10 is just as easy to work with. So that's what we're getting in here. We're basically taking the 1.5, dividing by 10 to get 0.15. And now it's going to multiply these two together. So we're going to look for that to get the positioning. Now, what we're really doing here is we want to take this rectangle and we want to position it so that it is, with transform, off center at the bottom and is only going to mask part of the text. So how does it work? We're grabbing our rectangle. Our height here is our 0.15. Now, the reason I found that was just because I went and found let's just turn everything off besides this, the height of our text. And then I just went and shrunk it down by a value until I found out that it was roughly 1/10 the height when it was font size 1. So font size 1 is 0.15. So that's the height there. And then we want to be able to move this rectangle up and down, because again, this is going to mask things. So we come across, it's going to mask our text. So we want this rectangle not to be in the middle where it's fully there. We want it to move up and down. So when we're doing our offset, this is going to actually reveal different parts of the text. And the reason why it stops when it gets to 1, again, we made the value here when our instances are at 1 by 1. So when this is 1, and this is 1, they don't overlap anymore. When it's less than 1, they're overlapping. So we really don't need to know anything more. Once it gets above 1 there, when any of these values get above 1, they're not really going to matter. And the reason we linked the font size here is so we can only have to worry about linking one thing here, and that just basically the font size, as you can see up the top here in the link. This is basically done so that we can just change the font size here and it'll automatically scale our offset with it. It's not actually zooming in and out, but it's creating that sort of effect. And as it comes down to the bottom here, we're just multiplying that in. So it means we don't have to worry about doing individual math for both of the offset and the font size. We just do it all up here in one section and feed that in. So 1.5 and 0.5 again, get us our nice little offset. So let's look at how this goes again down here. We're taking our text render, which is the bottom. We're grabbing from it our display name in, our string in. We're grabbing our scale here from our font size. We're grabbing our line width from, let me click on here. We're actually grabbing it from the resolution pack. So if we grab our patch info, this has got a resolution tab. If we take an unpack node, which this is, it'll actually break it into our X and Y components. And we just wanted to grab our X component here, which is 1920. Now, the reason we've set our line width for 1920 is we have the ability to make font sizes large. And we just wanted to be able to make those scroll off the edge. If I wanted to come in here right now and change this line width to something that was much, much larger, it would keep it as one solid text, but it's just much easier to know that we could stack it into double size if we needed to. Right. Next, we're applying the mask. And again, this mask is controlled by the offset. So when we're here, we're now going into an edge detect. If we don't have the, If we don't have the button for full letters on, it'll start cropping. And inside our edge detect, we've actually got the pretty mode turned on. You don't need to, but it does what it says. It makes it look pretty. So looking at this edge detect, we're pretty good. We get across the transform. Now, if you're not familiar with instancing in Wire, all of these dotted lines means that there are actually 5 or like there are a numerous amount of data signals coming in at once. So we're actually using something called a linear node, and I'll explain that now. So our transform here, we have 5 different instances coming in. And that means that once we feed 5 instances into a transform, you notice our transform here itself has 5 instances. This means we're going to take 5 different versions of whatever was fed in, and we're going to offset them with whatever they are in the translation and scale. Now, our translation here, if I come back up and make this really simple, go 0.5 and 1.5, we can see that, let's actually make that 1 and 1 for making it really easy. So you can see here, you have now a pack of 108, 216, 324, etc. So from the main center point, we are going 108 pixels down for the first one, 216 pixels down for the second one, etc. And again, because we're not moving anything in the X, they're all 0. They're not changing in their X position. They're just changing in their Y position. Now this is done by multiplying a few things together here. So again, we're grabbing our output from our resolution in Y, and we're just multiplying that by 2. So we're basically saying we want double the height. And then we're now going to come across here to another multiply, and this is going to grab our combined scale here. And we're using that as our minimum. What this will basically give us is how high can we possibly go before we're really off the side. You know, at 1, we're at the bottom of this, the center of this text is at 540, which is right at the bottom of the screen. So we're running this into a linear node. Now, linear nodes are good at creating instances. So you can see here, we are feeding it in a value into a minimum and a max. Now, it doesn't make sense normally to have a higher minimum than a max, but because this is the bottom, I actually want it to start high and then go low. You can actually rotate that around and make this one down the bottom here, this input. But the way that these stack, if I come back into the instances here, if I go back to my offset and I change my letters to full, you'll notice that the actual stacking order matters. So if I come in here, I wanted to have this on top of the one below it, on top of the one below it, on top of the one below it. If I actually switch this around so it was a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 424, etc., then it would stack the other way around. Whereas this would be the bottom, then on top and on top and on top, and it didn't look quite as nice. Alrighty, long explainer about the instancing. There's a much better tutorial video about this on the Resolume page. Then we're going into our transform. The scale here you can see is actually instanced. That is coming across from these two nodes here. And this is referencing our shrink instance. So you can see if I start turning that up, I've got a 1 take X node here. And that was only because I thought it made more sense to be able to turn up the shrink. Some people might want to put it the other way around. I just thought it was kind of weird if you were just turning it up and it was just getting bigger. And by default, people want to leave things at 0 instead of leaving them at 1. So like that was there. This just basically means when it's 1, take X. When this is 0, it's sending out a value of 1. So the normal 1 scale. And when this is like say 0.5, it is a 1 take X, which is 0.5, which means these are going to be half scale here. Again, our friend, the linear node comes in. We are giving it 5 instances. So in here, we're given a size of 5 because there are 5 groups of text we're cloning. And we are basically going from, in this case, almost 0.5 as our minimum to a max of 1. So each of these will be given a scale value that feeds into our scale here. So again, 5 instances, 5 lots of data for translation, 5 lots of data for scale. And that gives us a transform with 5 instances, no surprising. What we've done next is we've put in a merge node. Now I only learned about this recently. Merge nodes are great because it takes all of these 5 instances and merges them down into 1. If we didn't do this, if I went straight from this transform, you would actually see that we now have 5 video mixes and 5 texture outs, which is highly inefficient. So if we grab our merge node, bring it in, now we only have 1 instance and 1 texture out. Alrighty, so that's a pretty lengthy and probably not super condensed version. It's quite late here. I just wanted to walk this through. So again, really, really high end. We have the text we can enter and edit. We have an offset ability in here. We have the ability to crop that offset. Let's just make this a bit bigger so it's easy to see. We have the ability to change our font size. We have the edge thickness, thicker or not as thick. And we have the ability to make it full letters or cropped. And the signal flow again from start to end. We are taking in our text at the top, our string in. One lot is going direct into a text render, which is the main text, coming into our video mixer, and that is the one on the top layer. We then have a second layer for the top and a third layer for the bottom. Again, looking at the bottom ones down here, we are grabbing our font size and our offset, doing some maths down here, creating a rectangle with the same height as the text. And then we are offsetting this rectangle when we do our offset. So we are only revealing certain parts of our text once we mask that off, adding an edge repair, edge detect, using a linear node to give us multiple versions in Y position, and using our scale up here in another linear node to give us instances scale, descending down. This is coming into a merge node. This merge node is going into a mixer. That is into a texture out. And from there, we are inside of running this in Arena where we can put a bunch of animated parameters. So I hope you were able to follow along with this. Might have been a bit long-winded. It's not super cut down. I'll promise I'll do better next time. But yeah, feel free to use this on your shows, pull it apart, make something cool with it. If you do use it, please tag me on Instagram at ctrldchaos, CTRLDCHAOS. I'd just love to see how it gets used and how you're doing some cool things with Wire. Thank you very much, and have a fantastic week. Cheers.